well, fáilte lig ansa. Agus táthas an fáilte chorómhaigh ansa agus muide buchas gur tháinig sibh. Rinne muid orníhil le breis agus blion chun sucrú a all ansa a gurthaí an rialtas bun arís bhun comhanas de gach duine. An teachtain sicáte rinne muid dréacht comhaontú leis an DUP. Dúirt muid le gur gá an comhaontú a dridgeam. Hepar thu sinna dhéanamh agus inné chur Arlene Foster deire tuban leis na cainteanna. Bhí dréach comhaontú agin acht na Gaeilge, acht ultaise agus acht bheasa comai. Ní raibh rud be faoi an Gaeilge riachtanach, rud be. Beimiid ag fila arás na ceistena na cearta seo, agus beimiid ag caint leis an dá rialtas, agus ag géirí orthú cógáil idir rialtas a thuairt le chéile gan bhfuil. The DUP leader brought this phase of negotiations to a close, and she said that there is no current prospect of these discussions leading to an executive being formed. It's up to Arlene Foster to explain this, given that the DUP and Sinn Féin leaderships had achieved an accommodation across the issues involved. In fact, we had a draft agreement by the end of last week. At that time, we advised the DU leadership that the deal should be closed before those opposed to it could unpick everything that we had achieved. We made it clear that if there was a delay, that there was every chance that the package would unravel. And so it came to pass. The DUP failed to close the deal and then went on to collapse the talks process. So the first point that I want to make is a very obvious one, and that is that this phase of negotiations is over. Sinn Féin has worked diligently with the governments, with the DUP and with others to restore the institutions, and we did so because those institutions are in the best interests of all of our people, of our economy, our public services, and the process of building reconciliation. However, the institutions must operate with respect, equality and integrity. That was Sinn Féin's approach, and that remains our approach. There's been a lot of speculation about what was in the draft agreement between us and the DUP, and there have been calls for the draft agreement to be published. Sinn Féin at this time will not be publishing the draft agreement, and this is in keeping with our obligation to ensure that any future phase of negotiation is given the best chance of success. However, this will not happen unless the unionist parties embrace the need for a rights-based society and for citizens here to enjoy all of those rights available across these islands. In keeping with our commitment to transparency, we will provide copies of the draft agreement text to the two governments, and we will brief party leaders in the Assembly and in the Oireachtas. Let me also say that a lot of mistruths and inaccuracies have been peddled about the content of the draft agreement. So for the record, the draft agreement included an Irish Language Act, an Ulster Scots Act, and a Respecting Language and Diversity Act. The Irish Language Act includes a provision for the official recognition of Irish and the creation of an Irish Language Commissioner. The repeal of the ban of Irish in the courts was also to be legislated for. Let me make it clear. At no stage was it envisaged to make Irish compulsory for anybody or to apply quotas to the public services. These were not considerations. There was no meeting of minds on marriage equality. We did, however, anticipate that the issue would be fully considered by an incoming Assembly in the form of a private member's bill, and it was acknowledged that no party alone could table a petition of concern. There was agreement to review the abuse of the petition of concern and to establish a committee to look at the Bill of Rights. Separate from the agreement between the DUP, Sinn Féin had a commitment and has a commitment from the British Government to put to consultation the legacy mechanisms agreed at Stormont House and, crucially, to release the funding requested by the Lord Chief Justice for Coroners' Courts. Sinn Féin accepted in the draft agreement the DUP proposal on the stability of the institutions. There was agreement that the British Government will legislate so that the Justice Minister would be elected in the same manner as other ministers, that is to say, by Hunt, following the Assembly elections in 2022. So that is some of the detail from the draft agreement. Michelle?
The reality is, folks, that if the DUP leadership had closed the deal last week, we would, in fact, today be on the cusp of re-establishing the executive. We would be setting about bringing about a budget, and we'd be set about our work to deliver for all citizens. Given that the DUP leadership has now prevented this, the onus is very much firmly with the two governments, who now must move ahead, implement existing agreements that were made in relation to legacy and an Irish Language Act, to meet their obligations in relation to equality by bringing forward legislation for marriage equality. We will be speaking later on today to both the British Prime Minister and to the Taoiseach, and we're calling on them, as we did previously, to re-establish the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference as a way forward. We're also very conscious of the issue of Brexit, and we're very conscious that the Tory government, supported by the DUP, are set on taking this part of Ireland out of the European Union, despite the vote of the majority of citizens here. Sinn Féin will continue to oppose this, and we will continue to push the case for special designated status, which is receiving traction right across Europe.
It became clear towards from Monday onwards that there was a level of disengagement which we found alarming. I have to say we were very disheartened by it. However, as we do, we persisted. We said publicly and privately that it was now decision time, and when we said that, we meant that. I have to say that Michelle and I and our entire team were very straightforward with the DUP. We put our cards on the table. We said that the decision needed to be made, and it's at that juncture that the DUP faltered. At no stage were we given the impression, much less the information, that there was a deep problem within the DUP. And in all fairness to us, we're not mind readers. We don't have special insights into the hearts and minds of the DUP officer board. We understood that party officers had been informed, that different briefings were going on, and we understood above all else that we had a deal. We understood that we had landed on a respectful, workable accommodation. And from what I've told you, you will gather, we didn't get all our own way. You never expect that to happen. We did make room for issues like the sustainability piece, which was critical, we were told, to unionist confidence. And above all, the package of legislation, which does contain Irish language legislation, also had Ulster Scots legislation, also had explicit legislation that recognised and protected British values and that sense of identity, which we don't deny and which we don't seek to in any way undermine or demoralise across the community. I am concerned because I was listening to different broadcast programmes, and from some of the general public, what I took to be a real concern that there was some effort now to enforce Irish language on people. Can I just say to people who are genuinely worried about that, that was never the case. And that will never, ever be the case. There is no attempt to enforce Irish. This is about enabling Gaeilgeoirí, enabling those that speak Irish to live their lives in that manner. It is not about making an imposition on other citizens. And to those political individuals and parties who exploit that fear to whip up a concern and to whip up division, I say shame on you. Shame on you for so deliberately misrepresenting a good measure an inclusive measure in a way that would cause such levels of concern or even distress, for all I know, amongst many of our unionist citizens. We're not saying all of this in a spirit of one-upmanship or to embarrass anybody. It's absolutely crucial at this point that people have accurate information. That is absolutely essential, that people have accurate information and know, as I said earlier, that even those issues that are painted up by some with party political interests as being impossible are not impossible. In fact, it's very possible to get an accommodation. This isn't a football match, and this isn't about ratcheting up respective score sheets. This was and is about outstanding issues, outstanding rights that must be honoured. So marriage equality is not a Republican issue or a nationalist issue. Marriage equality is a people issue. It's a society issue. It's a human rights issue, it's a civil rights issue, and that's not orange or green. So if you've chalked that up as 1-0 for Sinn Féin, I think you're wrong in doing that. I think you're very wrong. There's a majority in the Assembly for marriage equality, as you know. There is a majority view. It's palpable on the ground. It's cross-community, it's cross-party for people to enjoy that right. And we certainly don't regard that as being a potential victory for us. That's a societal gain. We instanced for you the issue of sustainability. That was not an issue for us. We were told it was a big issue for unionism. I didn't instance for you, but let me tell you that we also had ring-fenced additional money in respect of health. We talked about the health reform programme, which Michelle O'Neill, of course, initiated, and that plan. So lots of these things, far from looking at it through the lens of who scored what, has to be considered in its totality. And by the way, the Irish Language Act was consciously and perfectly balanced with Ulster Scots, and then with that overarching legislative piece, which was about respect and giving places and people and their languages and their customs and traditions their rightful place in an open democratic society. So we don't regard it in footballing terms, nor will we ever. And anyone who portrays it in that way, I think, has missed the entire point of this exercise. Well, we've been clear all along that direct rule is not an option, and if the DUP thought that they'd sink this process to achieve direct rule, I'm afraid they will need to think again. Direct rule is not acceptable to nationalism right across Ireland. It's something that the government in Dublin have very firmly ruled out. And it begs the question now as to what we do next is the net point. I mean, the budget ought to be considered now. I mean, Michelle ought to be entering the executive now into as joint First Minister. We should be in the business now of debating around who should be the Speaker and all of those matters. We believe at this juncture and as a matter of urgency, the two governments need to convene the Intergovernmental Conference. I think we need to have a conversation about where we move next. But to those who hanker for the old days or the past or the status quo, it's over. And what we are up for, in a respectful way, in an inclusive way, in a way that has us listening as much as talking and engaging with our own base, but also with unionism and with society as a whole, we need to have that conversation about how we move forward. But anybody who is under the illusion that we are just back to base and back to direct rule, that's not where it's at.
Look, we're a party of dialogue. We've spent the best part now of 13 months trying to reset these institutions, to have them back up and running again, that they actually can start to once again command public confidence in their ability to deliver. So we are a party of dialogue, but we can't go back in. The issues are well known. And we've repeatedly pointed this out to the DUP. These issues aren't going to go away. So you either have to deal with them now, or in a month, or 2 months, or 6 months, or in 2 years. If these institutions are going to be able to do what they were originally intended to do, look after all citizens, actually work on the basis of equality and respect and integrity, then we have to resolve these issues. To go back to Tracy's point earlier, this is not about a score sheet for us. This is not about Sinn Féin demands. This is about good government. This is about equality. This is about respect, and they're the principal tenets in which you can establish these institutions again. So the issues are well rehearsed, as I suppose is the answer to your question. We don't need endless talks. We said we would enter this phase, we would test it very quickly. We have tested it. We negotiated in good faith. We stretched ourselves. We found an accommodation. We didn't want to come out the other side of this where the DUP feeling humiliated, because that was never our intention. This was about resetting these institutions. The opportunity now has been missed because of the DUP's crash landing yesterday whenever they went out and made their statement very, very clear about the potential for this talks process to produce anything.
Sinn Féin, go on in carta agus aontas na hÉireann, equality, rights and Irish unity.